Well, the writer and artist Norman Lindsay wrote that uninhibited, hearty laughter, once common in Australia before the First World War, just about disappeared in the years after it ended. The so-called war to end all wars, when Australia had a population of just 5 million, some 60,000 people were killed or died of disease. The lives of 1 in 10 men aged 18 to 45 were cut short. So for a young country, just how traumatic was this decimation of the adult male population? And what of that lost generation? Who were they? And what might they have contributed if they'd lived? In a moment, we'll speak to historian Ross McMullen about his new book, Farewell, Dear People. First, this report from Hamish Fitzsimmons.
At the end of the war, the lucky returned home.
We lose probably the promise of the future as well, some of the best and some of the brightest. It's a colossal tragedy, and I think that tragedy is measured by the forest of war memorials that we build right across our country.
If you're looking at the impact on families and familial relationships and the impact of mothers and parents, it was enduring and quite profound, really.
The effect of the war on families is sometimes obscured by the Anzac story. Many women lost more than one son, and traditional mourning gave way as the casualty lists began to take up whole columns of newspapers.
Many mothers gave 2, 3, 4 sons to the war effort, as it were. They really did sacrifice their sons. And for a long time, that sacrifice, I don't think, has been fully acknowledged in terms of what it was like for a mother to lose that many sons. To lose one son, but to lose a number of sons was so devastating for so many women that they really did carry the burden after World War I.
The deaths were bad enough, but the living also had to cope with the effects of their experience.
If you walk down any Australian street in any city or town in Australia in the 1920s, you would have seen what they called a war-wrecked generation. These were the men who came back, but they came back irreparably damaged by war. They came back gas, blind, crippled, sometimes insane.
There were also more peculiar effects of the war on society, such as the growth of spiritualism, where the grieving hoped to communicate with the spirits of their dead loved ones. Leading figures in post-war spiritualism included Sherlock Holmes creator Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who even toured Australia to speak about the movement.
This thing is not the foolish thing which is so often represented, but that it really is a great philosophy and, as I think, the basis of all religious improvement in the future of the human race.
What that's about is families, mothers, parents, siblings trying to get close to their lost one, trying to get close to the soldier, trying to be at one with the soldier in another life. And so spiritualists really did play on that, and it was a very popular movement.
And more recent research on the Australian troops of the Great War dispels the image of the crafty bushman who traded a swag for a rifle.
The image of the simple bushman that sets off to war is probably historically wrong. What we have is, in many cases, a highly educated fighting force, a fighting force we could ill afford to lose in building the new Commonwealth.
There's a call to bear in mind that this day is not one to celebrate warfare, but to remember its horrors.
I think we should remember the promise that we made these men in 1914, 1918, that this would be the war to end all wars, and it hasn't turned out to be that. Nationalism is what drove that generation to war in the first place, and we perhaps should be a little bit more cautious in the way that we celebrate nationalism during Anzac Day.
Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.